Hey everyone, yes, we're back. It's another edition of The Gun Cranks. I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, along with Roy Huntington, who is the special assignments editor for FMG Publications, and Erick Gelhaus, who is the editor of AmericanCop.com. Hello, gentlemen.
Howdy, sir.
Good afternoon.
This is literally an on-the-fly. Normally, it may not look like it, but we kind of plan this stuff out before we hit record. But today, we were kind of just having a conversation, and suddenly Tom McHale goes, "Stop, hit record, just talk about this." And the topic is, we're going to talk about things we've seen or read about working on the street that weren't guns and knives. That's probably one of those topics. I think there's a lot of actual knowledge here, even though we're going to have fun with it. One of those things, there's so much horse dumplings out there, especially on the internet, about this will work and you can use this, and a chess piece can be used to disable a... No, we're going to get the three cops together and we're going to talk about what we've seen, again, maybe heard about. We never did any of this ourselves, and we're not recommending anybody do any of this themselves. But let's jump back into the conversation where we were told stop, hit record, is car doors. You don't see car doors as a weapon or a defensive tool. But
are they in the use of force continuum on your agency? Is that
exactly? It's number 7.
Weapons of opportunity. Yes,
that's true.
Right? Absolutely.
We could use other things if we could explain why. And I'm thinking of one of the very first, if not the first, taser deployment I saw. Dealing with some folks who'd been, let's just say they're driving, it attracted our attention, and then it went to a fight because they didn't want to go to jail. And as one of my coworkers running across the parking lot screaming yippee-ki-yay and drawing his taser for the first time, I'm propelling a dude into a car door in a spin because that was the best thing to put him into versus air, a curb stop, or a pavement. But the car door worked in that one while the taser got deployed on somebody else, and the gag report he wrote is priceless. Now, I've heard rumors, never been there for one of these, that there may have been instances in the profession where somebody was fleeing or trying to get away, and an officer following them in a patrol car may have inadvertently opened a car door into the person while they were running away, causing them to stop their flight and comply. I don't know.
And sometimes those car doors on the old beat-up pool cars, they would just come open on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
when you're driving by, they would just fly open. You'd say, "Oh, no, I'm sorry. Oh, too late." Yeah. No, that was real common. Yeah.
I just had a sudden thought, a bit of lore that I used to tell the young officers when we were training rookies is if we typically do use a car to put a person down over searching them or whatever. If you have somebody that's bleeding for whatever reason, probably because they were victimized by their victim or whatever, but if they're bleeding and you put them on the car and you have them put their head down and you get blood on the car, I always leave it for a few shifts. That's always good to point to and to, look, pal, you want to be the next one?
Yeah. I had a big dent in the hood of one of my beat cars. There's a big dent. And so I would pull up somebody like this and point at the dent. And I've got him by the back of his neck. And he would go, okay.
Well, one of my favorite stories, and I don't think I've told this before, we had a situation, I'll just be kind of vague. Automobiles are on the force continuum, okay? In certain circumstances. We had a situation where a guy pulled a gun on some other officers and they hit reverse and they backed up, and my old captain saw this happening, so he could have reversed, but he decided the best defense was a good offense, so he put the hammer down and he struck this gentleman. Now, I was standing right near there because of what was going on. He went, 20 or 25 feet in the air and about 40 yards down range. And the coolest part, though, was in the newspaper the next day, it talked about this car chase and standoff we'd had, and it said that it was concluded when officers nudged the suspect with their car.
That's when the press was still your friend.
Exactly. I've seen student pilots with less airtime than that guy did. And when I got down there, I was one of the first ones. He's got his ankle is somewhere on the other side of his head, and he said, "Why'd you do that?" Well, let's work this out. But yeah, so if you have to nudge somebody, okay, let's have a serious point here. If you're in traffic and somebody's walking up on you to rob you, carjack you, you've got a 3,000-pound weapon at your disposal. Use it. Yep. Just saying.
Drive away.
Yeah, drive away.
Drive over him. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Now, if you back up, and that'll be a little harder to prove in court. Or if he's over there in the yard and you drive over, that's not good.
I was on scene for an event that did not involve my agency, and I was not the operator of the vehicle in question, where somebody asked for permission to use the car as an impact weapon, and they were told no. Used it once, guy went airborne like you described. They used it a second time because this guy was still armed with a knife, soaking up extended range impact weapons, the big foam rubber projectiles. Yeah, used it a second time on him, and at that point, tasers finally worked, and he got caught and handcuffed. Without
he had enough.
You just brought up a good point about those soft impact things, slugs we used to shoot out of shotguns. And they had some other ones. Because I know in the training we had, for people who don't know, beanbag rounds, that's what they were. And for people who don't know what that is, it was like a shotgun shell, but there was a beanbag in it. And when you fired it, it would, leave the shotgun, open up, and then knock into a bad guy. And then it knocks them down, and it stops whatever's happening. And we had a guy up on the roof of a car one time, but it's like you said earlier, it's like, oh boy, we get to deploy the beanbag guns, right? And so, I don't know, there was like 5 cops with beanbag rounds, because we had orange shotguns in the trunk. They were orange plastic shotguns, and those were just beanbag shotguns. So we didn't have any other accidents. And it was just like that. They opened up on this guy. Now, and there was drugs involved, so that may have done something. But he was up there, he was doing like the Macarena. It was like, ow, ow, ow. Well, we keep waiting for him to fall down and fall off the car, but it just never happened. And finally he said, would you stop doing that to me, please?
Well, in the one that I was talking about, I watched the guy soak up 4 rubber slugs out of a 12-gauge shotgun.
And those are different from beanbag rounds.
Yeah,
I hit
those
him.
Hurt bad.
I shot and hit him with 3 foam projectiles and 1 foam OC projectile, myself in the torso. Then there was the car stuff. Right, and this guy got tased, and that was when he finally went. He was not feeling any pain, which is why he was stabbing himself, which is why we were there in the first place. But we kind of all brought it up. All of us worked in an era where the side-handle batons, the PR-24s, were out there, and Roy was saying that Roy was saying he'd never seen one work, and I can remember I had one of the polycarbonate ones from a Nodnock.
Yep, me
and
too.
rolled up on a call
of
a fight in the street, and when I get out of the patrol car, one guy's flat on his back and another dude straddling his shoulders, pounded him in the face with a fist, and I hit this guy 2-hand strike in the elbow, and he just looked at me and laughed.
That's scary.
I went through probably the first 20 years of my career when I had a baton. It was either an expandable, and we'll talk about those, or it was the full-size side handle. But after about 20 years, I went out and bought a Koga Cocobolo Diamondwood straight stick, and that's what I carried my last 9 years.
Well, when I first came on, it was straight sticks, and I used to carry unauthorized when I shortened one a little bit, because you could leave it in your ring all the time, even when you're driving. And so what was cool about that was that if you jumped out of the car, you had your stick with you. But no, I'm with you, Eric, with that side handle baton. I hope we don't have any hate mail or anything, but Brent and I were talking, they poke really good. Like if you were in a crowd and you had your side handle baton holding down low and there was some guy doing something, you could go up and just kind of like poke him in the breadbasket and he would lose all interest and nobody really knew what happened. It's like, why'd Charlie fall down?
Yeah. I did have one successful deployment of the PR-24 one time. Right after I'd got out of class, we were at a local hotel and this guy was drunk and being stupid and he'd finally talked his way into jail. So, I don't know if you guys remember, they taught you a handcuffing technique where you put the baton in and you spin around and kind of lock him up. It's pretty cool to do.
I remember how to do it. Yeah.
Well, exactly, but I literally just got out of class the day before, so I'm, I'm doing this, and I get him all trussed up like a turkey, and there's 4 or 5 of us there, and he's just goat drunk. And he said, "Hey, ease up on that judo there, Chief."
Can we go back to the goat drunk?
That's right, goat.
Is that not a term you guys use, goat
that's
drunk?
an Indiana thing, I think. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Now, we've had no goat terms on somebody's probation, but I'd never heard the term goat drunk.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think I read that report. Now, we also had, because the San Diego Police Department was cutting edge, being a West Coast agency, but we had nunchucks, which, when they first started training us with nunchucks, we were all going, well, this is stupid. You know, it's one more thing we have to carry on our belt. You expect us to use this. But I have to say, after you got to where you understood how to use them, and they showed you 20 or 30 different moves, but really, if you just learned about 2 or 3, that's really all you needed in the real world. And I have to admit, they were actually pretty effective. You'd hit yourself with them a lot, though. There were a lot of guys walking around with a black eye or a elbow in a bandage or something where they got out of control. But what they were mostly useful for is, let's say we've all had that drunk driver or somebody sitting in the car and they're holding on to the steering wheel and they won't get out of the car no matter, and you don't really want to OC him because now everybody's OC'd and and well, what they used to do with these was that you make them like chopsticks and you put them around over his wrist and then grab them and you just twist them like that, and boy, you can march them march over here, okay, walk over here, okay, I mean,
I saw one guy do that one time, and it was pretty impressive. But like you say, the guys, it's like a karambit, the curved knife. They're more dangerous to the user most of the time. But I was going to ask Roy, we carried straight sticks, but you were a big city downtown department. Could you do the real cool spin moves with the lanyard? I was always so in awe of seeing like a New York City beat cop, and he could do all this great stuff with his baton. Could you do that?
Actually, when I joined the reserves in Chula Vista, there were guys that had come on in the late 40s and early 50s, and they all had these little short billy clubs with a leather thong. And so a couple of them showed me how to do it, and it's actually really easy. I'll show you when I see you again. But I never carried a leather thong on my nightstick because if somebody grabs it, he's got you now. And so that's why I didn't ever want to do that.
Did you guys ever use SAPs?
Well, we did, and then they got unauthorized. Because did you used to buy uniform pants that had a SAP
with
pocket?
The SAP pocket?
You remember those?
Exactly.
Yeah. Everyone used to say, "Oh, is that a flashlight pocket?" And it was like,
sure
yeah.
I had been off the FTO program about 2 weeks. Got a call to meet up with a senior deputy in a parking lot somewhere, and he'd been an MP in Vietnam, and he pulled up. And he didn't say a word. He just handed me a paper sack and drove off. And it's like you're the new kid getting handed a paper sack, like, oh, dear God, what's inside this thing?
Yeah, don't be $100 bills,
Pair of SAP gloves.
Oh, cool.
And I still have one of them.
Yes.
I gave one to one of my trainees as just like you'll never be able to use this, but you appreciate the history, but I kept one.
Well, I had a partner because we were allowed to use them when I was reserve in Chula Vista. And I had a partner and he was left-handed. And so we bought one pair of SAP gloves. And so I had the left-handed one and he used the right-handed one. And I have
like superheroes.
It is. Well, because it doesn't seem like much. But if you put one on and you just thunk against something, for people who don't know, it's a pair of gloves and they've got lead sewn into the back along the fingers and stuff. Yeah, powdered lead. And so there was a guy one time and I was doing a field interrogation on him and he was a squirrel. He was sitting to the left or standing to the left of me. And I just didn't like what he was doing. And all I did was I kind of went like this with my hand just to kind of swat him away a little bit while I got organized. And it knocked him right on his butt. I happened to catch him just right with these SAP gloves. Down he goes. And I just thought, this is interesting, Yeah, but none of that, we weren't allowed to have any of that kind of stuff on the San Diego Police Department.
Now, I'll probably tell a story, but this is 30, maybe pushing 40 years ago. Bell telephone used to be a pretty good impact weapon. Did you know that? when somebody I knew worked in the jail, that was, back in the early 80s, a guy was brought in that was what we call a frequent flyer, a common client that, comes in every day. And the guy weighed $105 soaking wet, but he always wanted to fight. So the trainer of this young trainee, this bright-eyed, starry, idealistic young officer, his trainer, who had been there for a long time, was doing all the paperwork, and the guy is shackled to a bench with a handcuff, and the guy's just giving him all kinds of grief, and the jail officer's doing a good job, and blah blah blah. Finally, he wanted his phone call, and he wouldn't answer any more questions. He wanted his phone call, so finally he kicked the desk real hard and sent it back into the jail officer.
Oopsie.
So this guy leaned forward as far as he could, and the jail officer said, "Oh, you want your phone call?" And he goes, "Yeah, I want my phone call." He picked up the receiver, wham! Hit him right in the temple, knocked him straight unconscious with the phone. And of course, you know what he said? "Well, I guess you don't get your phone call, do you?"
That's funny. We used to have these parking controllers, and they would just run around these little cars and do parking controller. And I got a call to cover one time, and he sounded a little desperate. And so we, 2 or 3 units, zoomed up like that. And now we'll always remember, as we got up there, this parking controller, who was a fairly decent sized young fellow. He was waiting to be a reserve and then wanted to be a policeman. So he's one of those guys. But he has just beaten the snot out of this guy with his portable radio. And so we used to have those brick, what were they, Motorola's, I think?
Motorola's and Midlands.
The big squares, yep.
Just as hard as a rock, and he had it like this, and he was just beating the heck over some parking, to do. So I don't even know where we did or learned all that stuff from. Did you guys ever have expandable batons?
Yeah, they worked great until you had to hit somebody with it.
See, I liked mine a lot.
Yeah.
You pull it out.
It's like a lightsaber.
It looked like just like a lightsaber coming on.
Yeah.
And
I liked it because you could deploy it in a doorway if you need to. Like, you could just snap it up.
Yeah.
I remember a fight one time, and I was just rolling up, and this guy was basically whipping 3 officers, and one of the defensive tactics instructor, who, just a guy lived in the weight room, great looking, well built, and knew 47 ways to, make you feel pain without even, working up a sweat. He rolls up with his expandable baton, and I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. So the guy was kind of standing over the officers, and the officers are, kind of dragging themselves off. And he hit him perfect in that common peroneal. Trying to remember my terminology. Right above the knee, which should have caused him to lose a leg, defecate, explode spontaneously. And the guy just looked at him and goes, "Don't do that." And then the fight was on. So that was pretty much, I think, the last expandable baton on our department, because everybody's like, all it does is really get them revved up.
I think there's a lesson here for people who aren't police who might be watching this, and that is on the TV when they say cops are fighting with somebody, and they say, well, why don't they just handcuff him? Or, why don't they use their nightstick to properly take him down? Or why don't they, fill in the blank? It's like, it's because we know, and we have, and almost all the time that stuff doesn't work. I mean, if somebody's wound up and he's fighting and you hit him with a nightstick, a lot of times they don't even notice that you did.
Well, one more thing, the unarmed stuff, pain compliance, who that works on? Works on police trainees. That's exactly who that works on. Stuff on the street.
Yeah.
Never, ever.
Never had it work.
I never saw mace work, but I saw OC work if it was used right.
Yeah. OC was good.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we better not overstay our welcome.
Yeah, we better wrap this up. But that was a fun one, and that came perilously close to a operational debrief. So that was a great time. But don't forget, I've always got to say, don't forget to check out the Gun Cranks podcast. If you don't want to watch us on YouTube, maybe while you're driving to work, you can listen to us on your favorite podcast directory. And please check out AmericanHandgunner.com, our sister publication. Tom's our normal one of the Gun Cranks. He's not in on this because he's never beaten anybody with a flashlight. I mean, not that we have either, but anyway, but check out AmericanHandgunner.com, check out the Guns Magazine podcast, and of course, AmericanCop.com, of which Erick is the fine proprietor. And we did this last episode, but Erick, give a quick plug for American Cop and explain what it is and isn't.
Hey, real quick, it's not just a cop magazine. It's not just for law enforcement. Right? There's stuff there for cops, yes, obviously. There's also stuff for the average citizen, the prepared citizen, somebody who wants to be responsible for themselves and the folks around them. We've covered backup generators, water supplies, security fencing in the last several months. You know, acquiring gold and silver legally on the front end of things. In addition to training topics, equipment, firearms, things like that. We kind of cover the whole gamut. Again, it's not just for cops, but it's for prepared citizens too.
Good stuff. And I'm glad you clarified. I'm thinking, first thing, get a mask and a handgun. That's not how we're telling you to acquire. And check out our special interest publications, Old West and DIY and some of our other great stuff. You can get it through our websites and, of course, on Amazon. So we'll wrap this up. We went a little long because, frankly, we were having some fun. But on behalf of Roy Huntington and Erick Gelhaus, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat. We'll see you next episode.